I knocked on that door, expecting the sound of waves and her laughter. Instead, I heard the scrape of a mop bucket behind the wall, the quiet of someone who had been erased, not lost. Hard to believe 5 years of distance could rewrite a whole identity, but life has a way of testing the relationships we thought were fireproof. If you believe the best chapters of life can happen after the worst betrayals, consider subscribing to this channel. We celebrate truth, justice, and second chances. Before I tell you the rest, drop your city in the comments, hit like and subscribe if respect, dignity, and family are non-negotiable values to you. Now here's how it really began. My name is Elle Whitfield. I'm 63. I've spent 40 years reading numbers like other people read pulse charts. For the last 5, I worked in London, buried in cross-border fraud cases. I thought I'd seen every shape of deception. I was wrong. The flight back was overnight smooth, cold air, quiet cabin. No texts, no updates, no warning. That was the point. I wanted daylight and truth, not interference. I wanted the real version of my daughter, not the filtered one. Her name is Eve, scratch that. In my mind, she'll always be my girl, 26, bright-eyed, loud-thinking, impossible to intimidate. 5 years ago, when she hugged me goodbye at Heathrow, she had plans. Real plans, tangible plans, the best kind. The house I bought her sat on the Pacific coast, ocean view, white fences, salt in the breeze. I paid $2.3 million for it, every cent legitimate, earned through forensic audits and sleepless math. I told her it was her launchpad, not her debt. She insisted it was the home where she would live her dream life. I never expected to knock on its door empty-handed and be told I didn't exist. I landed at 8:10 a.m., rented a compact gray sedan I barely noticed. Ethan Cole, my oldest friend, sent a message, "Call me when you see sand and nonsense, Elle." I smiled reading it because I knew the nonsense was coming. I didn't call. I wouldn't call. I wouldn't let ego tip the scales. I drove for 53 minutes along Highway 101. Rain had hit earlier. The asphalt still smelled like wet iron. Wipers synced at a steady pace, thudding like metronomes. I felt tuned, alert, but calm. Too calm, maybe. The Whitfield women before me had built composure like brick foundations. I turned into Pinecrest Valley at 9:03 a.m., the coastal community where the air feels like an unfiltered confession. Small town, medium-sized gossip, long-lived memories. Everyone there knows someone told a lie too well or trusted silence too long. I inhaled once, memorizing the scent like evidence. It would matter later. The beach house sat on a cliffside curve facing an angry morning tide. Bird calls overhead, distant, slightly chaotic. Not music, not cinematic soundtrack. Just life, raw, inconsistent, unbothered by my emotional agenda. A mop bucket dragged across tile echoed faintly through the door before I even knocked. It was a tiny sound, but forensic auditors learn to respect tiny. Tiny anomalies become huge narratives when ignored. I rang the doorbell once, a calm chime factory preset exactly the kind a builder advertises, not a family picks. The door opened after 8 seconds. She opened it too fast to be uncoached, too calm to be spontaneous. My daughter stood there. Torn apron, rubber gloves, knees powdered from cleaning polish. Not dust from living, polish from performing. She looked at me with a practiced blankness like a whiteboard wiped too many times. She didn't look like she'd met horror. She looked like someone trained to react after horror, not to prevent it. "Ma'am, can I help you?" she asked. The sentence was 5 words, and it nearly undid 40 years of training. This was a greeting scripted for a customer, not a mother. I recognized her. Same cheekbone structure as mine. That stubborn Whitfield jawline we tease about in family photos. But her eyes were flattened, like someone had iron-pressed the texture out of them. Her voice didn't carry surprise. It carried compliance. "Eve, it's me." "It's Mom," I said, my accent still half-stained with British edges from years in London. She blinked twice, then shook her head slowly. "Mom, I don't have a mother," she said, each word spaced like controlled timestamps. "You must have the wrong house," she added. I felt my lungs glitch before anything else did. When you audit healthcare fraud that long, you start diagnosing voices like EKG patterns, and hers was tampered with. A man walked up behind her. Slow step, expensive shoes, arms folded. Not loud, not villain music, just a man wearing hostile calm like cologne armor. His posture radiated coached authority. "This woman doesn't have a mother," he said. "Her family is dead. You must be confused," he added. Confused? No. I was a forensic auditor trained to authenticate signatures, not narratives. Yet here I was, staring at a narrative trying to authenticate itself. I looked past him into the kitchen where a window reflected the morning sun wrong. Through that glass, I spotted her scrubbing the floor. She scrubbed with mechanical speed, not emotional chaos. Her motions thunked like task completion, not domestic instinct. Their house ate turkey last year and composted guilt this year, but I didn't know that yet. What I did know was that the dress dream was gone. The glove dream was here doing grout duty. Then came the coldest instrument reading I had that day. Silence. Real silence, not pause symbols, not ellipsis, just a vacuumed moment of sound. That was the cold open. Life-changing open loops sound like silence before a legal file drop. I stepped into that silence because I realized she never invited it. Someone staged it around her. Numbers and lawsuits are background tension. Identity theft is frontline crime. Manipulated memory is shadow felony. But an erased parent is drama nobody prepares for. That moment framed the story. Foundation misfiled identity overwritten. Kitchen window stairs are heart surgery for the narrative. I inhaled again, slower now. I let the anomaly write my pacing. Before she could speak the next line, I noticed another detail. Her mop bucket had a faded sticker from Wells Fargo, the one I recognized. I held onto it like ironic evidence. Not the sticker. The timing. He'd entered her life last year, no, but that bucket had already replaced her trophies on that timeline. I didn't raise my voice. I let silence calibrate the courtroom that wasn't built yet. The door was the hook. The mop was the evidence. The cold clarity was the resolution I hadn't delivered yet. My daughter didn't recognize me as mother. She recognized a script about a mother. That's the difference. The scene shifted fast in my head, moving straight to the paperwork, without opening it. I murmured to myself softly, like voiceover. Paperwork is numbers that survived emotions. I'll let the pulse rest for court. I stepped back onto the porch gravel, crunching under shoes that had walked different courthouses before hers. She stared after me like someone who needed rescue but was trained to resist it until it made sense. The calls I would make later would not follow emotion. They would follow evidence, and coffee, and federal lines. For now, the story was one framed by a door and a bucket and a silence that was too accurate to forgive and too early to narrate fully. I turned back toward the tide, whispering in the wind like someone making a note without crying. Recognition of a reality glitch that needed procedural rescue more than emotional outrage. And those 8 seconds of silence, they became the contract my composure signed before any signature analysis ever did. The ocean wind stayed salted in my coat fibers as I pulled away from my daughter's door. No matter how steady your hands are trained to be, grief always waits its turn after shock. My first destination was never a police station or a relative's living room. It was a paper haven, a place to recenter the narrative before confrontation, a small coffee shop by the coast. Ethan was already waiting there. I hadn't spoken to anyone yet that morning, but Ethan could read my face faster than any satellite or credit report. He stood when I entered. That alone told me this man was more than an old friend. Ethan Cole was 64, retired, silver hair, trimmed, neatly posture, calm but present. He wore the kind of calm that isn't rehearsed. It's earned. "You saw the house?" he asked. I nodded, setting my coffee down. Steam spiraled once stable, not dramatic, not stylized. "What did you smell first?" he asked next. "The mop," I answered. Ethan leaned back slightly, almost amused. Funny how truth always announces itself in the smallest sounds. Let me rewind. When Eve graduated 5 years ago, she said she wanted to stay in California. She used phrases like belonging, but she never weaponized distance or guilt. She meant sunshine, not exile. So I made a transfer that changed her postal code, not her identity. I purchased 1247 Maple Street, a beach house overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The price was $2.3 million paid from my legitimate savings, not a loan, not a condition. I transferred $230,000 in earnest money first. The rest followed through escrow. Wells Fargo managed the accounts. There was no wish for control, only protection. Protection that left a paper trail strong enough for a nation, quiet enough for a home. The same day, I established the Family Asset Shield Trust in California, seeded with $2.6 million. It was designed for security. It would later be forced into a courtroom for accountability. I made sure every clause was audited, twice notarized once, and witnessed by consistency, not theatrics. The trust was managed by Wells Fargo Trust Services, ensuring Eve had a protected financial foundation. I had told her then, freedom is not protected by silence. It's protected by evidence of intention. She had accepted the watch, the deed, and the premise that her life was hers to architect. That memory would haunt me in February 2024, but in June 2022 it looked perfect. But the anomaly of a loving relationship being weaponized whispered later. After 6 months of casual dating, Eve first mentioned Brandon. But this Brandon was not the hostile, calm version I would meet at the door. This Brandon was part of a paper disguise layered from someone else's obituary, someone else's death certificate. Marcus Holt didn't target vulnerable widows or reckless heirs. He targeted independent, educated, middle-aged women with clean credit, inherited assets, and disciplined autonomy. Deception, just like disease, has favorite hosts. I learned later that Marcus mined obituaries for wealthy families with single daughters who inherited property. By borrowing a dead man's identity, he hid in legality long enough to isolate someone brilliant. When he convinced patients to question their own pulse, I realized family wasn't the target. It was the alibi. Ethan placed a file on the table. "Look at this housing market from 2022 to 2024, Elle," he said. "Even Ocean View homes don't justify memory loss." Ethan explained how high-value real estate always hunts a very specific profile. Half of it is the location. Half of it is the story that comes with the owner. "A manipulator doesn't buy a house," Ethan said. "He buys the power story behind the house," he added. I asked Ethan, what was the housing market like in this area back then? Ethan smiled softly like a poker player holding paperwork. Pricey, stable, yet powerless to save a heart swapped by a stolen identity. Ethan slid his hand into his coat pocket and pulled out a small pocket watch he had given me years ago. It was engraved with a phrase about accountability and a small serial number on the back. He set it on the table between us, its ticking, steady, slightly uneven, mechanical, but real. I touched the faceplate. No dramatics, just a small, familiar, irregular rhythm. The watch did not argue or explain. It just ticked steady and stubborn while the room caught up with the truth. "Before you left, I gave you that watch to remember something simple," Ethan said. "Time tells truth in pressures, not narratives." I answered. The watch clicked softly as I closed it again, a tiny moment of domestic comedy pulled into a thriller scene. Even in chaos, small objects evolve into anchors of cognitive dissonance. If someone steals your car, you file a police report. If someone steals your money, you petition a court. But theft involving hearts, minds, identities, and familial trust, you document it twice. You authenticate the pressure points. Ethan had spent 35 years as a real estate appraiser. He knew pen pressure better than polished seals. He said signature authenticity isn't about style. It's about operators who can't fake human timing. My coffee cooled. It needed to cool. Heat keeps attention. Cold keeps memory. Outside laughter from the street vendors drifted into the shop, a small comedy beat followed by a silence drop in our conversation. I let the evidence sit between us like two timestamps set far apart but connected by intention. I said, "Let's see if the paperwork survived the narrative." We got into Ethan's vintage silver car afterward, another motif, pay what you earn. The ride was slow but solid. Ethan did not ask where we were headed next because the route was already written in caffeine and database cross-checks. The story wasn't done. The Spanish airport announcement at the end of the call wasn't the reveal, but it was the seed of urgency. When therapy poses as romance, you question the credit. When marriage poses as therapy, you authenticate the strokes. In my world, you never close a file too early. You let the numbers breathe until the courtroom is ready to hear them. The familiar weight of the watch in my pocket kept my hands from shaking. If daughters, sisters, or heirs can be isolated by a file, they can also be freed by one. The cold evidence in my mind finally had a name. Brandon stepped into Eve's life like a system update nobody asked for. Not loud, just precise. Too precise. He called his method behavioral calibration, a fancy phrase, a dangerous disguise. I didn't know that phrase yet when I saw my daughter scrubbing floors, but now on Ethan's porch of files, it docked itself into a pattern I couldn't ignore. Ethan said, he weaponized silence first, then vocabulary. I took a breath because it was time to dissect intent, not emotion. The bell above the coffee shop door rang again quicker than the last. A woman in a Navy paramedic jacket walked in, hands still smelling faintly of latex and ambulance disinfectant. Her presence had momentum, the kind momentum that signals emergency without sirens. Her name was Maya Alvarez. 36 paramedic and neighbor in Pinecrest Valley. She had the calm efficiency of someone who saves lives without narrating heroism. Elle, are you okay now? She asked as she slid into the seat beside me. I nodded, not wanting to sacrifice pacing, because forensic auditors don't let their heartbeats distract from timestamps. Maya was here for procedure, not curiosity. This mattered, because procedure spots patterns before stories do. Maya reached into her evidence pouch, her phone, and opened a photo. It was not dramatic, but it was honest, time-stamped, 6:31 a.m. It showed Eve's wrists, the thin red marks, half hidden under coat fibers like faint accounting ledgers. She wears gloves to mop floors, yet her wrists show pressure marks from a truth she didn't file, Maya said. Wrist marks don't lie, she added. They don't fake hesitation. I swallowed once because cognitive dissonance is not a feeling, it's a pattern. Let me rewind. 5 years ago, I legally bought that beach house, transferred it without debt or condition. At the same breath, I formed the Family Asset Shield Trust, seeded with $2.6 million calibrated for protection, not leverage. It was not about ownership. It was about firewalling a life, not controlling it. I had told Eve. When life checks, you make sure your assets can't checkmate your identity. Eve had once believed that. I believed it too, I whispered. That whisper mattered now because someone was manipulating that file. Maya leaned forward slightly, posture professionalized, precise, but empathetic. She began explaining Brandon Holt's profile like a medical chart. Targets, independent single women, 35 to 65 inherited assets, stable credit reports, strong emotional self-reliance. Weapons, fake identities harvested from obituaries, psychological scripting disguised as therapy, isolation protocols, dependency, architecture disguised as care. He reads obituaries like menus, Maya said, and he picks the ones that won't scream back. I felt the room slow, breathing matching evidence progression. Ethan glanced at Maya, then at me. The moment had timing like a comedic autopsy without losing narrative integrity. Ethan wasn't flatlining comedy. He was elevating engagement. Are we investigating a marriage or a misfiled obituary? Ethan joked. Maya smirked once. Arms folded, not in villain mode, but in shared generational disbelief. Neither. We're investigating pressure points, Maya said. Pen pressure, shoe pressure, glove pressure, narrative pressure. The CSI metaphor was not fictional. The pattern recognition was real. After I left Eve's doorway, the ocean tide didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like a timeline glitch that needed procedural anchors. Brandon didn't rewrite her memory in one day. He scripted her reactions day by day, phrase by phrase, to isolate her from familial logic. He said to her, "You don't need relatives, you need calibration." She accepted it, thinking it was therapy. It was scripting. He didn't just isolate her from family, Ethan said. He isolated her from variability, spontaneity, and contrast. This was not a misunderstanding. He had arranged her life like a staged model home, every room locked to his approval, every window facing only him. That morning, before coffee cooled, I had stepped back onto my porch, letting the silence calibrate the trap I could feel but didn't close early. Because lateral thinking saves stories just like Maya saved my pulse that morning. Now I let the cold, conceptual frame guide me forward, and paperwork is pressure points, documented without theatrics. Therapy embodied into a script is manipulation anatomy. I asked Maya, "What kind of script can bend 5 years of memory out of shape?" Maya answered 25 phrases, repeated over 63 dinners, 42 morning coffees, 120 digital pings of dependency scaffolding, 42 morning coffees. I counted them too late at the beach door, but I authenticated it now. Maya continued. Her wrists showed pattern divergence before any bank statement did. "So why didn't she call you in 5 years?" she asked. I paused counting beats because the scripting replaced the phone calls I answered. Control disguised as calibration always kills variability first. Maya nodded back, professional empathy intact. The script convinced her that the only valid household voice was his. I exhaled once because manipulation replaces memory by consistency pressure. Moments like that do not need to be loud. They stay because they land in the part of you that refuses to forget. I leaned back, slow breath, narrative pacing, shifting like coast tide rising toward a challenge I could finally name. Therapy is not supposed to erase a parent, I said. It's supposed to give them distance that heals, not exile that controls. Maya smiled, once subtle comedy inflection but seriousness intact. "I think he forgot to forge the marks," she said. I reached into my coat, felt the small, uneven ticking of the pocket watch Ethan once gave me. It was mechanical, slightly human, slightly comedic when juxtaposed with this tragedy's cold, investigative clarity. The watch did not speak, but it recorded timing like a witness that survived silence. "That's your first motif evolving into a trap," Elle Ethan said. I nodded, letting the watch talk close our comedic moment and open the audit hearing narrative I would file next. By the time the coffee shop closed, my emotions had cooled like the cup in front of me. What stayed hot was the pattern. Predators do not rely on magic. They rely on paperwork blind spots and other people's routines. So I decided to audit all three. The next morning, I drove back to Pinecrest Valley, not to my daughter's door, not yet. I drove past the subdivision gate instead. There were 5 cameras on that short stretch of road, 2 at the entrance, 1 traffic camera near the curve, a doorbell camera across from Eve's house, and a small garage camera. I parked near the mailboxes and called my attorney. Not a savior, a specialist. Someone who understood injunctions the way I understood balance sheets. "I need an emergency protective order," I told her. Not drama, just a legal pause before anyone moves assets or people. She asked me to describe everything again, calmly, chronologically, the altered memories, the forged marriage, the wrist marks Maya had photographed. "Bring your trust documents and any property records," she said. "We freeze first and argue later. You cannot fix a story while it is still being edited." I hung up and stepped out of the car. Maya's ambulance was already idling near the corner. She walked toward me with a clipboard in one hand and coffee in the other. "Morning, Elle. The neighborhood is buzzing," she said, "about what I asked. The mysterious new husband or the dramatic old mother?" Neither, she answered. They are arguing about whether his car is leased or owned. Ethan had just arrived, folder under his arm, hearing that last line. "Never underestimate an HOA's priorities," he said. "Cosmetics first, safety last." We headed to the small community room near the pool. The homeowners association kept their security monitor there. Maya had already charmed the retired teacher on duty. With her permission, we pulled last week's footage. "No investigation," Maya said softly, "just a wellness review." On the monitor, the 5 cameras formed a grid. Timestamps crawled in the corners like patient heart monitors. Camera 1 showed the gate. Brandon's car entered at almost the same time each evening. Precision disguised as routine. Camera 2 showed the curve by the ocean. Eve walked alone with a trash bag, always after dark, never empty-handed, never relaxed. The doorbell camera across the street captured arrivals. Food deliveries, ride shares, one florist truck. Eve opened the door in a cleaning apron every time. "Notice she never steps out just to breathe," Maya said. "Always working, never simply existing." The fourth camera above a garage caught part of the sidewalk and driveway. Here, Brandon appeared with 3 different sets of guests. "Alibi number 1, Ethan said. Dinner with colleagues." Brandon opened the car door, laughing, guiding 2 people toward the house. To a jury, it would look like a normal night. "Alibi number 2. Maya pointed. "Couples therapy. Another evening, another arrival. A woman with a leather bag, not quite purse, not quite briefcase. She stayed 40 minutes and left without a notebook. He introduced her as a therapist," Maya said. "But nobody saw a file or folder. Therapists can have good memories," Ethan replied. "Just not courtroom-level memories." The third alibi came on Friday afternoon. Brandon walking a dog that was not theirs, shaking hands with a neighbor, dog sitting, Maya explained. A perfect excuse to wander, study routines, map vulnerabilities. 3 alibis, all friendly, all plausible. None explained why the legal owner of the house moved like hired help. The horrible pattern was not obvious violence. It was quiet erasure. We printed still frames and laid them beside the signatures Ethan had brought. He pulled a small magnifier from his pocket, the kind jewelers use. "Pen pressure incongruence," he said. "Your daughter's true signature has firm downward strokes. The forged one hesitates before every capital letter." He traced the ink with a pen cap. "See here. The pressure dips before the flourish. That means copying shape, not moving with muscle memory." Maya leaned over his shoulder. "So we have cameras showing her moving like a servant and papers claiming she made financial decisions alone." "Exactly," Ethan said. "Her body and her signature are testifying against each other. I usually side with joints and tendons over ink." I felt a small, grim smile forming. Dark humor does not erase fear. It keeps it from swallowing you. "You two sound like a crossover episode," I said. "CSI Stationary meets Paramedic Patrol." Maya snorted. "I read bruises," she said. "He reads pens. You read numbers." Between the 3 of us, he chose the wrong zip code. "My attorney called back just after noon. I filed for an emergency protective order," she said. "Assets tied to your trust are under temporary judicial supervision. He cannot legally move that house right now." "What about serving him?" I asked. "He feels hostility long before most people feel concern." "That is where we stay elegant," she replied. "No flashing lights. We serve him in the middle of normal life." The plan was simple. Maya would conduct an official wellness check as a paramedic, responding to a vague report about a tenant fainting. During that visit, a plainclothes process server would be present, supposedly confirming residency for association records. The order would be handed over with a neutral smile. By the time he realizes what he is holding, the legal clock is already ticking, my attorney said. That evening, I walked the edge of the subdivision, pocket watch in hand. The same 5 cameras watched me now. 5 cameras, 3 alibis, 1 horrible pattern. A man who looked generous on paper, and a daughter who looked busy on video. From a distance, everyone seemed fine. Predators like him trust distance. They trust people to glance, not read. I had spent 40 years reading. Now I had footage signatures, wrist marks, and a protective order on its way to his door. It would start with an envelope, a stethoscope, and 5 silent cameras, watching who really owned what. The next morning began in fluorescent light, not ocean light. Santa Clara County Superior Court instead of Pinecrest Valley's quiet streets. I had spent decades in boardrooms presenting audit findings to executives who thought they were untouchable. This time the numbers were the same, but the stakes were my daughter. My attorney met me at the courthouse doors. She wore a dark suit. No drama, just structure. This is an emergency hearing, she reminded me, not to punish anyone, to protect assets and preserve time. Time for what I asked. Time to prove what really happened before he moves anything, she answered. Inside the courtroom felt smaller than any corporate conference room I had ever entered. Smaller, but heavier. Ethan was already seated behind counsel table files arranged with almost surgical precision. Maya sat in the second row in paramedic blue, hands folded but alert. Then I saw him. Not Brandon. Not yet. First came his shield. Kenneth Hayes Jr. stepped through the side door with a stack of folders. 41 years old, quick movements, restless eyes, suit slightly too sharp for his posture. He looked like a man who had memorized every courtroom trick on paper but never tested them against real evidence. Paper defense fast but fragile. He glanced at me with polite pity, then at my attorney with faint condescension, as if this were a minor billing dispute. The judge entered. We stood, we sat. Formality never bothered me. Process is the only thing between power and chaos. Counsel, the judge began. We are here on an emergency petition involving property held in a family trust and a recent quitclaim deed. My attorney rose first. Your Honor, my client established the Whitfield Family Asset Shield Trust in good faith years before any alleged marriage occurred. She purchased the Pinecrest Valley Beach House entirely with her own funds. The trust protects both the property and her daughter's future. Recently, a quitclaim deed appeared purporting to transfer that home into joint ownership, with a man using the name Brandon Phillips. We are asking the court to preserve the status quo, freeze related transactions, and review the authenticity of that deed. The judge turned to Kenneth. Response. Kenneth moved fast, like a man racing his own nerves. Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding. Ms. Whitfield's daughter is an adult. She married my client. She chose to share her home and assets with her husband. There is no emergency, just a parent who refuses to accept healthy boundaries. The word boundaries hit my chest the same way it had at the door. Weaponized psychology on a legal letterhead. My attorney did not flinch. Your Honor, we are not here to litigate feelings. We are here to review documents and risk. She handed copies of the original deed, the trust instruments, and the disputed quitclaim to the clerk. I watched each page move like a heartbeat across the room. Ms. Whitfield, the judge said, you are a forensic auditor. Yes, Your Honor, I replied. You are trained to detect irregularities in financial records. Yes, I answered. With respect, I am also trained to follow paper, not stories. A small smile flashed in the judge's eyes. It vanished quickly, but it was there. Let us hear from your expert, the judge said. Ethan took the stand with the unhurried confidence of someone who had spent 35 years valuing other people's pride. He was sworn in. He stated his name, his background as a retired real estate appraiser and consultant on title irregularities. My attorney handed him the disputed quitclaim deed. Mr. Cole, what do you notice first? He studied the page through his magnifier. The signature purports to be Eve Whitfield, he said, but the pen pressure tells another story. In her genuine signature, downward strokes are decisive. The cross on the T is swift, consistent, slightly elevated. Here on this quitclaim, the pen hesitates before each major stroke. There are micro tremors at the start of the W and the tail of the D. That pattern is consistent with tracing rather than natural writing. Someone copying shape, not writing with familiar muscle memory. Kenneth jumped up. Objection. Speculation. My attorney stayed calm. Your Honor, this witness has decades of experience reviewing original signatures for high-value property transfers. The judge nodded. Overruled. You may continue, Mr. Cole. Ethan tapped a small mark on the projection screen. Also note the baseline. Her real signature rides slightly uphill, a common confidence marker. The forged signature dips, then compensates. That dip usually appears when the writer is concentrating on appearance instead of message. So in your expert opinion, my attorney asked, is this consistent with my client's natural signature? In my opinion, Ethan said this is not her genuine hand. It is an imitation. Kenneth tried again. Your Honor, at most, this shows she was nervous. Many people sign legal documents under stress. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Hayes' nervousness does not normally change the direction of a lifetime habit. While they argued, the courtroom clerk projected the footage stills from the 5 neighborhood cameras. Eve with the trash bag, Eve in the apron, Eve never simply living in her own home. Boardroom evidence, kitchen reality, side by side on a public wall. We took a short recess. The air in the hall tasted like disinfectant and anxiety. I sat on a bench outside, hands folded around the pocket watch Ethan had insisted I carry. The ticking grounded me more than any mantra ever could. Maya appeared with a paper cup and set it down firmly on the bench beside me. Steam rose in a straight, angry line. "Boiling hot," she said. "You need to stay awake for this part." I looked at her. She pointed her chin toward the courtroom doors. "Let them cry about hurt feelings in there," she added. "Paper speaks louder than guilt trips." The line cut through my tension like a scalpel through scar tissue. I exhaled, almost laughed. "Thank you," I said. "Just doing my small part," she replied. "Ethan has the pens. You have the numbers. I have the caffeine." When we returned, the courtroom felt slightly different. Same walls, different gravity. The judge held the forged deed in one hand and the original trust documents in the other. The contrast was visible even without expertise. "Mr. Hayes," the judge said, "where was this quitclaim executed?" Kenneth shuffled his papers. "At a law office, Your Honor." "Whose office?" He hesitated for the first time. "A colleague's. I do not recall the exact suite number. Were you present when Miss Whitfield's daughter allegedly signed this document?" He cleared his throat. "No, Your Honor, I received it afterward. So you cannot personally attest that she understood or approved this transfer." Another pause. "No, Your Honor." My attorney stepped in gently. "Your Honor, we are not accusing this attorney of forgery. We are simply showing that someone used his reflexive trust in paperwork as cover. In light of the signature analysis, the behavioral evidence, and the unexplained circumstances of this deed, we renew our request. Freeze the trust-linked accounts. Suspend property transfers. Issue a protective order preventing further encumbrance of the Pinecrest Valley house." The judge took a long breath. "Courtrooms have their own heartbeat. You learn to hear it if you sit still long enough." "Motion granted," the judge said. "All transfers relating to this trust and this property are stayed pending full review. Any attempt to sell, refinance, or further transfer the Pinecrest Valley residence will be considered a direct violation of this court's order." Kenneth tried to object. The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Hayes, this is not punishment. This is preservation. Your client may appear at the full hearing with his explanations and his own experts. Until then, nothing moves. Boardroom rules had just protected a kitchen promise." As we left the courtroom, my legs felt oddly steady. I had not won my daughter back, not yet, but I had bought something predators hate more than exposure. Time. Time for the cameras to tell their stories. Time for the pen strokes to outvote the scripted memories. Time for a maid in $1 million kitchen to remember she owned the keys. The boardroom had spoken. The next battle would return to the house where this started. Not to mop floors, to let the paperwork speak louder than the man who tried to rewrite us. The order we won in court felt like a sandbag wall. It would slow the flood, not stop the river. Boardroom work was done for the day. Kitchen work had barely started. Now it was time for something colder. Identity, lines on paper, lines on maps. I drove home from the courthouse with the radio off. The pocket watch ticked in my jacket like a metronome. Each beat said the same thing. Do not waste this window. Fraud rarely begins with a big crime. It begins with tiny mismatches people decide to ignore. Brandon was one long mismatch pretending to be a man. At my kitchen table, I opened my laptop. Just spreadsheets and phone numbers I had hoped never to call. I started with the quietest one. The Federal Liaison Office for Identity Anomalies tied to financial crimes. The people banks call when something feels wrong. A woman answered on the third ring. Her voice sounded tired, not unkind, like someone who had heard every lie and stopped reacting. "This is Eleanor Whitfield," I said. "Forensic auditor, California license ending in 841. I need to report suspected identity manipulation connected to estate assets." She asked for facts, not feelings. Legal names, dates of birth, addresses, account numbers, the Santa Clara case number from the morning hearing. I gave her everything. Brandon's supposed name, the rushed marriage certificate, the quitclaim deed Ethan believed was forged, the trust data. I told her what the judge had ordered, what Ethan found in the pen strokes, what Maya saw on Eve's wrists. There was a pause, but not a confused one. It sounded like someone checking boxes. "Ms. Whitfield," she said, We may have seen pieces of this pattern before. You are not the only family with sudden marriages and vanishing houses. From this point, she added, do not confront him directly. If he is, who I suspect he already has exit plans. Those plans usually cross state lines. My stomach went cold. The board I was playing on had just grown wider. She gave me a secure address for documents. She gave me a reference number that sounded boring and official. Next, she said, call your bank's special liaison unit. Ask for asset preservation protocol, elder exploitation branch, even if you hate that word. I am 63, not helpless, I replied. I know, she said. The law uses that label to unlock tools. Use the tools, then argue about the language later. I hung up and called Wells Fargo, not the customer service line. The special liaison unit printed in tiny letters on my trust packet. A man answered this time. Polite, efficient. He asked the same questions in a different order. I explained the emergency order from Santa Clara, the disputed deed, the concern that any wire over $10,000 tied to my trust should ring like a fire alarm. Understood, Ms. Whitfield, he said. We can place a fraud observation flag on related accounts. We can require in-person verification for large transfers. In person, where I asked if the person signing is not really my daughter. Another pause. We can also place a narrative alert, he said. Anyone accessing these funds will see a note recommending direct contact with you before processing. Paper cannot stop a determined criminal, he added, but it can slow him, and slowing him may give law enforcement enough time. I thanked him. I sent every document I had, the trust, the original deed, the quitclaim, screenshots of the marriage certificate. While the files uploaded, my phone buzzed. Group text, Ethan and Maya. Maya SJC, hearing room 318 in an hour. Guard at the door is a character. Ethan to $10 says he thinks Elle is a retired judge. Maya number 50 says he tags her as corporate inspector general. I typed back 20, says he thinks I am here to audit the vending machines. For a moment, we laughed through thumbs and tiny screens. Round 1 in court had gone our way. Round 2 would be quieter. The San Jose courthouse felt different from Santa Clara. Busier halls, more languages in the air. Room 318 sat at the end of a long corridor. A uniformed guard perched on a stool beside the door. He looked tired, not unfriendly. Ethan nudged my elbow as we approached. Moment of truth, he whispered. Judge or inspector? Maya whispered back. She looks like the person who signs our checks. The guard held up a hand. Ma'am, purpose today, he asked. I handed over my identification and the hearing notice. He studied both. His eyes moved from the papers to my face. You the trust lady, he said. Room 318 loves people like you. Half my job is watching families fight without receipts. He passed my documents back with a small nod. Nice to see somebody come in carrying paperwork instead of cousins. Maya leaned toward Ethan. I think we both lost the bet, she murmured. Ethan shrugged. At least he did not say influencer. The joke cut through my tension better than any breathing exercise. I walked into room 318 with my briefcase steady in my hand. While we waited for the hearing officer, my phone vibrated. A message from the federal liaison. Short, plain, unmistakable. Preliminary check shows your subject name tied to multiple social security numbers. One confirmed deceased, further investigation underway. My throat tightened. This was not just a manipulative husband. This was a man who collected dead identities like spare keys. From the hallway through the open door, I heard an announcement from someone's phone. Spanish words, gate numbers, final boarding calls somewhere south of us. I could not tell which airport. I did not need to. I knew what that combination meant. Men like him move money one way, then they move people. The hearing in room 318 was administrative, not cinematic. No jury, no speeches, just a hearing officer, a recorder, and a stack of forms. We confirmed the freeze on trust-linked accounts. We confirmed the notice to county records about the disputed deed. We confirmed my authority to receive alerts on any attempted moves. It felt less like a thriller and more like a slow software update. Necessary, boring, essential. When it ended, the hearing officer said one thing that stayed with me. Miss Whitfield, she said, most people come when everything is already gone. You came before the disappearance. Sometimes that is the only difference between a tragedy and a prosecution. Outside, Ethan checked his watch. Maya checked her messages. I checked my phone again, another note from the federal liaison. Spanish language airport audio captured on call trace. Coordinating with partner agencies. Stay reachable. Identity was no longer just his story. It was an active file in several systems. Boardroom versus kitchen was yesterday's battle. Today, the map had widened. Yesterday, I saved a house on paper. Today, I had started to save a daughter across lines that ran beyond Pinecrest Valley. The alert came at 4:12 a.m., a short vibration against the nightstand followed by a tone I had programmed years ago for financial anomalies. It was not my bank this time. It was Life 360, the app I had installed on my daughter's phone when she went to college. Dorm safety, I had said. She had forgotten it was still active. The ping showed movement at San Jose Airport. Then silence. Then another ping 30 miles south near a private airfield outside Monterey. My first thought was not panic. It was arithmetic. Money leaves trails faster than planes, and money had already started to move. I forwarded the coordinates to the federal liaison. Then I called Ethan. He answered on the second ring voice, rough with sleep, but already alert. "You saw it too," he said. Wells Fargo flagged a card attempt from an airport lounge. "What lounge?" I asked. "Spanish announcements in the background," he said. "American Express data feed picked it up as a sound tag. That man does not know how noisy airports are." By the time the sun came up, we had a location pattern that looked like an escape plan drawn by someone addicted to shortcuts. Private terminal, corporate hangar, single black SUV in the security feed rented under a name with one extra middle initial. "Marcus Holt," Ethan said. "Same man we suspected last week under Brandon Phillips. The initials align with a deceased veteran's social security number." I felt my chest tighten again. Same game, different costume. We needed verification beyond forensic hunches. That was when Rachel Kim called. I had met her once at a financial ethics conference in San Francisco years ago. Back then, she had been the youngest investigative journalist on the Bay Chronicle chasing corporate fraud. Now she worked for a national outlet focused on elder protection and psychological exploitation cases. "Eleanor," she said, skipping the pleasantries, "your name came up in a federal alert cross-reference. I'm on background duty for a feature on manipulation networks. Tell me this isn't your case." "It is," I said, "and I'm not ready for publication." "Good," she replied. "Neither am I. I'm ready for verification." Rachel's specialty was connecting cold data with human stories without burning the victims. She called it narrative integrity. "Send me what you have," she said. "Not for the press, for pattern recognition." Ethan joined the call through speaker. His tone shifted instantly, half professional, half playful. "So Rachel, how many obituaries did you mine this week?" "5, she said. "And I'm starting to feel like a grave-digging algorithm." Maya, listening nearby, laughed under her breath. Ethan continued, "Do you get hazard pay for crawling through legacy.com only emotional damage?" Rachel shot back. "But the payout's better when the living get justice." Their exchange was half comedy, half therapy. It lightened the room without breaking its purpose. We laid out everything we knew, 3 fake identities, 1 forged marriage, a pattern of victims, all single women with property or inheritances. Rachel listened silently, typing fast. Then she said, "You're not dealing with a romantic scammer. You're dealing with an obituary miner." "Explain," I said. "They start by scanning local death notices for surviving family names. They look for recently widowed or divorced women over 50. Then they build a persona around the details, shared hobbies, mutual acquaintances, small charities. They use trust. Not just money trust, human trust." She paused, then added softly, "The difference is you caught him while the ink was still wet." Ethan opened a new spreadsheet on his laptop. "Rachel, if you send me your data on the other cases, I can cross-reference purchase history and county records." She laughed again. "Look at us. A journalist, an auditor, and a paramedic walk into a conspiracy." Maya raised her coffee mug. "I'm the one with caffeine clearance," she said. We focused back on the map. Rachel had access to a private investigative dashboard through her media partner network. She entered the Life 360 coordinates I had sent earlier. Within minutes, a secondary ping appeared: Monterey Regional, Private Gate 2. Flight plan filed under Silver Shore Holdings LLC. That's his company, Rachel said. Shell structure: one bank account in Delaware, another in Nevada. Both closed last night. The pieces clicked together faster than fear could keep up. Federal freeze orders were already in place, but he was moving before they reached the flight manifest. Maya leaned closer to the screen. Do you see that timestamp, the SUV camera tag? He's not alone. Rachel zoomed in on the grainy still. A silhouette in the passenger seat, hair pulled back, profile uncertain. Eve, Maya whispered. I stared until my pulse drowned out the room. It could have been her, or someone her size, or a trick of light on tinted glass. Ethan caught my shoulder gently. Elle, wait. Look at the wrist. The bracelet's wrong. That's not her. That's a decoy. Rachel nodded. He's done this before. He travels with someone who fits the victim's description. It buys him hours while the real person is kept isolated. She pressed a key, and another window opened a credit report log Ethan had helped me access through legitimate court channels. 2 new charges, one for fuel services, one for catering. Fuel was traceable. Food was faster. Rachel's eyes lit up. Private flights file service requests through one national vendor. If I call pretending to verify allergy information, I can confirm the destination. Ethan blinked. Remind me never to lie to you, she smirked. Smart men don't. 5 minutes later, Rachel ended the call. She turned to me. Private jet filed departure for 7:30 a.m., destination marked as Las Cruces, New Mexico. But listen, she added, the flight plan code references a stopover in Phoenix. That means he's buying time to swap aircraft. I closed my eyes. The Spanish announcements we heard earlier were making sense now. He was moving along the southern corridor, chasing the noise of tourists to hide his pattern. Can we intercept? Maya asked. Rachel looked at me instead of answering her. We can alert the liaison. They can issue a hold through FAA fraud coordination. But what you really need, she said quietly, is public exposure, not tabloids. Documentation. I nodded. Controlled exposure. Exactly, Rachel said. Facts only. Paper first, then story. Ethan exhaled, tapping his pen on the desk. Funny thing about men like him, he said. They live in the spotlight until the lights go forensic. Rachel smiled. And when they do, he grinned back. They trip over their own press releases. The humor landed softly but carried weight. We all knew what came next. The boardroom had turned into an operations room. The beach house had turned into a crime scene waiting to breathe again. And I, who once only read numbers, was now reading a pattern of survival written between them. The ping was no longer a sound of panic. It was a pulse, proof that time still had a heartbeat. Next, we would follow that pulse to the desert sky where his lies were running out of runway. The first sign of truth did not come from a courtroom. It came from a drawer. Not a dramatic one, just an ordinary desk drawer inside the Pinecrest Beach House. The day after Rachel traced the private flight, federal agents secured the property. They let me enter with a sealed inventory order. It smelled like lemon polish and lies. I moved slowly through each room, documenting items for the trust. Every piece of furniture looked returned, not lived in. Predators often redecorate to erase guilt. Then in the upstairs study, I saw it. A small black USB drive taped under the corner of the desk, dust-free, deliberate, hidden by someone who believed in control but not backup. I sat down, hands steady. Ethan had told me once real evidence never hides far from paperwork. He was right. I plugged the USB into my laptop. There were 23 audio files, each labeled with date, duration, and initials EW and BP. My initials, his alias. I pressed play on the first recording. A man's voice, calm, professional, rhythmic. The kind of cadence therapists use when they want you to surrender the room. Repeat, he said on the recording. You are safe when you follow structure. Your past memories are heavy. You do not need to visit them. Then my daughter's voice. Soft, faltering, trying to obey. I don't remember the old house much anymore. I paused the playback. The silence in the room was too clean. Even the ocean outside felt like it was holding its breath. The next file was worse. He coached her to distrust her family. He called it behavioral calibration, a phrase dressed in science but soaked in control. He said memory is negotiable Eve. Guilt belongs to the one who clings to it. I had spent 40 years auditing numbers. Now I was auditing truth itself. I placed my headphones on the desk and just watched the waves through the window. They moved without effort. They reminded me that motion could exist without manipulation. Rachel arrived 20 minutes later with her camera bag and her legal pad. She looked at my face and didn't ask what I'd found. She just set her coffee down quietly. "Tell me where it starts," she said. I didn't speak. Instead, I handed her the headphones. Let the sound carry the indictment. As she listened, her expression changed, not to shock, but to focus. She had heard dozens of confessions in her career, but this was different. This was structured gaslighting disguised as therapy. When the final file ended, she removed the headphones and exhaled. "This isn't counseling," she said softly. "It's programming." Her fingers tightened around the legal pad. "I can't air this raw, but I can frame it right." She turned toward me. "I'll pitch it as a public awareness segment. No names. Just the pattern. We'll call it living mind theft." I nodded. "Make sure they understand it's not a marital quarrel," I said. "It's exploitation under the pretense of love." Rachel smiled, thin but fierce. "I'll make sure of it." While she drafted her segment, Ethan joined us through video call. Behind him were folders stacked like armor. "You found the anchor," he said. "USB equals confession. That's object truth level 2. He adjusted his glasses. "Now the paperwork can translate it into legal language. No emotion, just ink." He sent over a notarized affidavit template for digital evidence. Each line had to be timestamped, hashed, and witnessed. I filled it out carefully, sealing lies inside the structure of the law. The metaphor struck me like letters carved into stone, so every stroke bore weight. Law worked the same way when done right. Each clause pressed into record until even silence spoke. Maya called next, still in her paramedic uniform. "Rachel's piece airs tonight," she said. "They're running it between local wildfire updates and an insurance scandal. Perfect timing for attention." That evening, I sat at my kitchen counter with the TV muted until the segment began. Rachel stood before the camera under studio lights. No sensational tone, no drama, just facts that glowed like embers. Across several states, she said a pattern has emerged. Predators posing as therapists or partners infiltrate vulnerable women's lives. They isolate, extract, and rewrite memories. Experts call it mind theft, not marital conflict, not miscommunication, but a crime that targets identity itself. Behind her, the graphic displayed a single phrase. The footage cut to neutral scenes, ocean waves, quiet houses, app documents on tables. No faces, just the echo of what I had lived. Viewers would not know it was me. They would not see my daughter, but they would recognize the pattern. That was enough. By morning, the liaison confirmed that the broadcast triggered 5 new reports from women describing similar experiences. Federal investigators reopened old cases. The story had given shape to something too invisible for most laws to catch. Ethan called again, half proud, half exhausted. "See?" The paper spoke louder than guilt trips. Rachel texted minutes later, "Segment trending under investigative justice." Maya replied with a single emoji, a pocket watch. Time. Always time. I looked at the USB drive resting beside my legal files. I didn't destroy it. I sealed it in a small envelope labeled Evidence Truth on Record, because someday, when my daughter was ready, she would need to hear how the silence was broken. Justice, I had learned, was not the sound of a gavel. It was the sound of truth playing through cheap headphones, proving that lies, no matter how clinical, cannot survive when paper remembers everything. When the call came from the courthouse clerk, I knew we had 72 hours. Not to win. To hold the line before the countersuit prefix was filed. Predators move fastest when cornered. So must justice. The timeline became our pulse. 3 days, 3 people, 1 plan. Ethan would verify the final signatures. Maya would monitor my daughter's health quietly through emergency medical channels. Rachel would craft the narrative break, careful not to leak the real twist. We did not need heroics. We needed precision. Ethan arrived at my house carrying a scanner, a magnifier, and 2 thermoses of coffee. He treated coffee like others treated holy water. "I brought extra," he said. "This case burns calories through nerves." We set up in the dining room. He spread the disputed documents across the table. The morning light cut perfect rectangles over the paper. Each signature told a timeline. The real ones flowed like confidence. The fakes tried too hard to mimic caution. Ethan leaned closer, his breath fogging the lens. "This quitclaim and the marriage license were produced within 10 minutes of each other," he said. "No clerk processes that fast. Someone batch-printed legal authority." He looked up at me. "By noon tomorrow, we will have a full comparative grid. Pen pressure ink saturation time stamps. Let him counter that with charm." I smiled faintly. In another life, Ethan could have been a surgeon, his tools smaller, but his cuts cleaner. Maya's part of the plan was more delicate. She was officially on shift as a paramedic. Unofficially, she monitored any call logs from Pinecrest Valley that involved stress responses. Her plan was to use emergency protocol as protection. If my daughter's name surfaced in distress reports, she would respond first. Legally, she told me a wellness check is still a medical act. No court can block it. That afternoon, I sat in my car outside the subdivision. Maya's radio crackled faintly through the phone speaker. "Dispatch copy," she said calmly. "Possible dehydration at Ocean View address." My heart stopped. That was my daughter's house. Then she added, "False alarm. Neighbor overwatered plants again." She laughed under her breath. "Your HOA should start charging emotional fees." I laughed too, just once. Even in chaos, humor holds the edges together. By evening, she confirmed Eve was safe. She was seen leaving the house with a social worker for an interview under court supervision. She looked tired but free of the apron. Maya sent a photo, not intrusive, just her silhouette near the sea wall. For the first time in months, her posture wasn't small. Rachel called at dawn. Her voice was low but steady. "The network wants a follow-up segment," she said. "They want faces." I said no. I thanked her. Exposure saves victims but also consumes them. Instead, she said, "I'll release a fact-check special. We will show the process, not the pain. That's what people over 50 understand," she added. "Proof, not pity." Her phrasing hit something deep. For my generation, truth is never a scream. It is a folder placed quietly on the right desk at the right time. That afternoon, the 3 of us met at my house one last time. The air was thick with deadlines and black coffee. On the table sat one folder, the federal affidavit, a federal form used to request coordinated prosecution under cross-state fraud. It looked ordinary. But inside were Ethan's signature analyses, Maya's health record summary, and Rachel's verification scripts. Every page was a testimony disguised as paperwork. Ethan looked at me. "You ready to file?" I nodded. "No speeches," I said. "Just accuracy." I placed the folder on the table and opened it. The sound of the latch was louder than expected. A soft metallic click that felt like an exhale. Maya grinned. "You're scary when you're calm," she said. "Calm keeps the pulse steady," I replied. Outside, something unexpected broke the silence. A siren. Then 2, then 5. We stepped onto the porch. A cluster of Pinecrest neighbors had gathered at the corner, fire uniforms bright and sharp in the late afternoon sun. One neighbor waved frantically. There's smoke near the beach wall. Within seconds, the volunteer fire team rolled their truck closer. Maya jogged over, switching from strategist to medic in one move. Ethan muttered, "Either karma has impeccable timing, or the HOA is staging a drama." Rachel, who had arrived minutes earlier with her camera, looked half amused. "Nothing like fire to unite the privileged," she said. The fire was small, a grill flare-up from a backyard barbecue. But the scene turned surreal. People cheered as Maya and the firefighters handled it effortlessly. Neighbors I had never spoken to were suddenly offering me bottled water, folding chairs, and unsolicited theories. One said, "You're that lady from the news, right?" The trust case. I just nodded. Let them fill the silence. It was safer that way. Ethan leaned close and whispered, "Free publicity, no leaks required." Rachel chuckled. Who needs a press conference when the neighborhood provides background noise and B-roll? The fire was contained within minutes, but as the firefighters rolled up their hoses, one of them, older, thoughtful, looked at me and said quietly, "You handled that like someone used to emergencies," I replied. "Paperwork burns slower." He smiled, half confused, half impressed. Then he tipped his helmet and walked away. Inside the house, we gathered again. Maya wiped soot from her cheek. Ethan adjusted his tie. Rachel opened her laptop. I placed the Russell affidavit folder on the counter. No shouting, no drama, just deliberate movement. I said, "This goes out tonight. Every line notarized, every timestamp verified." Ethan sealed it with the precision of a man signing history, not paper. Rachel recorded a short voice note to accompany the submission. Maya pressed the button to send. The upload bar moved slow like a heartbeat stretching between hope and consequence. When it hit 100%, none of us spoke. Silence filled the kitchen like ceremony. Outside, children were laughing near the street again. Normal life returning cautiously curious. I looked at my friends, the auditor, the medic, the journalist, 3 ordinary people who had turned truth into procedure. Our 72-hour clock had expired, but it did not end in panic. It ended in completion. We had not won yet, but we had made sure no one could rewrite our story again. And as dusk settled over Pinecrest, the folder on the counter glowed in the last light, proof that calm, deliberate justice could still outshine chaos. The folder went out on a Tuesday night. Marcus was arrested on a Thursday morning, not with sirens, not with a chase, with paperwork. Federal agents intercepted him at a regional airport outside Las Cruces. He was walking toward a private hangar, overnight bag in hand. One agent later told Rachel he looked like a man heading to a dentist appointment, not exile. Predators rarely imagine consequences. They imagine continuity. The arrest warrant cited identity theft, financial fraud, and coercive control. Our Russell packet had become one of several anchors. He did not resist. He asked for a lawyer. He tried to smile for the cameras. Rachel sent me the still frame from the security footage. He looked smaller without context, just another man whose charm had finally met record-keeping. The first hearing was procedural. I attended by video link. I watched his eyes scan the virtual gallery. He searched for Eve. He did not find her. She was at home that day, sitting at my kitchen table, tracing the rim of a mug with one finger. Maya stayed near her, not as a medic, but as a witness of survival. Ethan, sitting just out of frame, reviewed the court transcript live as it appeared in the digital docket. Rachel monitored National Wire Services, ready to intervene if the narrative twisted. The judge denied bail. Too many aliases. Too many vanished women. That was the legal beginning of the end. The personal beginning came weeks later at a dinner table. Not the ocean view table at the beach house. A smaller, plainer one in my townhome overlooking a modest garden. We kept the menu simple. Roasted chicken, steamed vegetables, brown rice. Food that did not perform but nourished. Eve sat across from me. Her hair was shorter now, her eyes clearer, her shoulders still carried a shadow. She picked at her plate and then looked up. "Do you ever get tired of being right on paper, Mom?" I smiled slowly. Right on paper is not the same as right in life. She nodded, eyes wet but steady. "I believed him when he said you were controlling. I believed him when he called your protection chains." She set her fork down carefully. "I remember signing things without reading. I remember repeating sentences he gave me like lines from a script. We let the silence breathe between us. Not the old silence of distance, but a new one room for truth to stand. I need you to know something," she said. "When I told the detectives what he did, I was not just testifying against him. I was testifying against the version of me he built." I reached into my pocket and felt the weight of the watch, Ethan's gift, the pocket watch of accountability. I placed it on the table between our plates. The ticking filled the small room, gentle but steady. "This is my reminder," I said. "That time only counts when we face what is real." Eve watched the second hand move. That day at the door, she whispered, "I thought you had become a story he told about you. I remember your face through the glass, stranger and mother at the same time. I was more afraid of his imagined version of you than of losing you. I did not correct her. I did not rush in with comfort. I let the watch tick. Finally, I said, "You survived something designed to erase you. That was never weakness. That was endurance." She exhaled a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. Therapists call it trauma bonding. I call it being rewritten in someone else's handwriting. I nodded. I spent months proving your signature on paper. Now we get to prove your signature in your own life. Her lips trembled into a smile. Rachel said the same thing in another way. She called it narrative rehab. Eve told me about her sessions with a new therapist, one who never touched her finances, one who always asked, "Does this belief feel like yours or planted?" She told me about Monica, too, the woman who had almost boarded that final flight with Marcus. Monica thought her family abandoned her, Eve said. She had voicemails proving they did not. He deleted them, then told her she was unlovable. Rachel had introduced Monica to a quiet support group, not a camera. No headlines, no exposé, just a circle of women rebuilding vocabulary. Monica is funny, Eve said. She makes jokes about unlearning love that hurts. She calls this phase her brain renovation. We both laughed softly at that. Sometimes healing needs new language before it can use old hope. Later that month, the trial began. I sat behind the government's table not as a victim, but as a witness of patterns. Eve took the stand for 3 hours. Her testimony was clear, specific, almost clinical. She described the behavioral calibration sessions. She detailed the subtle punishments for contacting me. She explained how he tied her sense of safety to his approval. At one point, the defense attorney asked, "Why did you not simply leave?" Eve paused, then answered, "Because he convinced me that leaving him meant killing my mother." The courtroom air shifted after that. Even the court reporter blinked hard. In the second week, Monica testified. Her voice shook, but her words landed. Rachel watched from the last row, taking notes not for publication, but for accuracy. The prosecution introduced the U.S. recordings. They played selected clips with headphones provided to the jury. No dramatic outbursts, just methodical cruelty documented. The judge listened face impassive pen, moving only when dates and amounts were mentioned. It was not a theatrical trial, it was a ledger reconciliation. In the end, the verdict was inevitable. Guilty on multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and coercive control. Additional charges were pending in other states. When the judge pronounced the sentence, Marcus stared straight ahead. Not at me, not at Eve, at no one. Predators rarely look at the people who survived them. They look at the future they lost. After court, we did not celebrate with champagne or speeches. We went home and cooked dinner. This time the table was fuller. Maya came straight from her shift uniform shirt untucked. Ethan arrived with a pie he pretended to have baked. Rachel brought a simple bouquet from the grocery store. We ate. We talked about ordinary things, traffic recipes, and neighbor's eccentric garden gnome. At one point, Eve stood up, walked into the hallway, and returned holding a folder. Not thick, not dramatic. "I drafted this," she said, placing it beside the pocket watch. "It is not legal yet, but it is mine." It was a personal boundary agreement. Her words, not a therapist's script. What she wanted from family. What she refused to tolerate again. I read it carefully. Then I signed at the bottom right next to her name. She watched my pen. "Do you mind that I put it on paper?" I shook my head. Paper is how we honor what we say we value. The watch ticked between us, not as a reminder of time lost, but as proof of time reclaimed. Later that night, after everyone left, Eve and I sat together in the quiet living room. No television, no background noise. "Do you forgive me?" she asked. I answered slowly. "I do not forgive what was done to you through you, but I forgive the survival choices he trapped you in. And I forgive myself." I added quietly for not hearing the irregular rhythm in your voice sooner. She leaned her head on my shoulder. We stayed like that until the watch chimed on the hour. If you are listening to this and you recognize someone in our story, maybe yourself, maybe a person you love, remember this. Love creates freedom. Paper creates justice. Age teaches dignity. Family chooses accountability. You're not too old to redraw the lines. You're not too late to pick up your own pen. And you're never, ever too small to step back into your name. That moment changed me more than any overseas job ever did. I didn't raise my voice to reclaim my dignity. I raised a folder. Freedom came not from revenge, but from timing and truth. Ethan verified ink. Maya watched my pulse. Rachel rewrote the story without burning the source. Most people intervene too late. I learned to intervene early, calmly, and smart. The pocket watch of accountability ticks slower now. It reminds me to forgive people, but secure boundaries with paper. Justice protects. Love heals. Age teaches us to stand tall without apology. Family is redefined when accountability is chosen, not forced. Before you leave this story, join our community. Comment your city and tell me how far this narrative reached. And if you believe our best chapters can start at any age, please subscribe. Your voice matters even when the storyteller is faceless. The pinned comment is waiting for you. Hashtags are your map to find us again. Love creates freedom. Paper creates justice. Age creates dignity. Thank you for listening until the end.